day.
Joining us now, Aaron Rice, the director of the Mississippi Justice Institute, a former Lance Corporal in the U.S. Marine Corps. Thanks for joining us, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Gerard. And it's actually the Marine Corps' birthday today, so I'm really glad to be.
Right?
Yeah, 246 actually.
Oh, I don't know where I got 110 from.
We've been around a long time. 1775 got involved in the Revolution. So
okay.
Yeah, but happy to be here today. And Veterans Day is tomorrow. So,
tomorrow,
yeah.
big week for that.
Yeah.
Also, I want to apologize to the audience. I got on such a rant there about taxing unrealized gains that I went right up against the break. So I apologize for that. It happens sometimes. But we asked you to come in today to talk about something that is top of mind to Mississippians and to many Americans, and that's vaccine mandates being imposed on Americans by the federal government. So let's break it down. I'll try it first and then let you comment. You got sort of two aspects of that. Mm-hmm. You got the private sector, employees with more than 100, employers with more than 100 employees must either vaccinate their employees or they must test, I think, weekly and wear a mask.
And wear a mask constantly in the workplace. And the employee has to pay for that test, and it's not cheap.
Employers are not required. And some of the latest guidance I saw, Aaron, says the employees cannot self-administer the test. They must do that in the presence of the employer, which opens up a gigantic problem for employers to observe all their employees that are unvaccinated testing.
And the record-keeping requirements alone are very burdensome, too. So there's a lot going on with that.
Bad. All right. Then the other aspect of this is the federal government requiring contractors, those who sell to the federal government essentially, and the federal workforce also to be vaccinated. But I think in that situation, Aaron, if I'm not mistaken, there is no alternative. There is no option for testing. You just got to be vaccinated or you're out of here. We should also add that on the private employer side, the penalty is quite steep. It's $14,000.
That's right.
However, the Joe Biden Build Back Better plan, it contemplates a $70,000 penalty, up to $700,000. All right, so that kind of sets the stage. Did I describe it accurately?
Yeah, that's all accurate. And you've also got another mandate for healthcare providers who take Medicaid and Medicare money, too. And
correct.
That's another one coming down. So there's a lot of these various mandates. The one we're involved in, we've gotten involved in the litigation challenging the Biden administration's federal vaccine mandate for private employers that you just mentioned.
Okay.
And so, we view that, and our client views it as just a massive and unprecedented federal overreach. It's blatantly unconstitutional. It's illegal in many other respects, even setting aside the constitutional concerns. And, we think it's just bad policy, too. I mean, voluntary vaccination efforts are the way to really increase participation here and trust in the system, not unconstitutional federal mandates,
Yeah. Well, we had our friend Lucian Smith on, whom you know, last week, talking about more from a legal perspective. And one of the things he explained is that the legal standard that must be met for something like this to be constitutional, lawful, is that the public must be at grave danger. And he cited that as the actual language. And it's kind of hard to reach that conclusion when you look at several things. One is it's 10 months after this guy's been in office, and he says, I think we need a vaccine mandate. The vaccines were available when he took office. So that's number one. Then number two, let's go get OSHA to promulgate 4-inch high of guidance and standards. And by the way, we're going to implement this on January the 4th. That doesn't sound like grave danger to me.
And you've got a lot of those are some of the statutory problems. We've got, like I mentioned, constitutional problems, statutory problems, but that's one of them. And it goes even beyond the grave danger aspect of it. I mean, it also requires that standard for an emergency regulation like this from OSHA requires there to be a grave danger to employees from exposure to substances and agents that are toxic or physically harmful or some new hazard. And you look at that definition, when you look at how the courts have applied that and how it's been interpreted, it does not include communicable diseases. And in fact, OSHA has never tried to regulate a communicable disease as, a quote-unquote workplace safety issue. This is something that people are exposed to, in the general community. It's not a workplace safety issue. And so that's one of the reasons that OSHA doesn't have authority to regulate here either, is because they've never had that authority. If anybody had that authority, it would be CDC, not OSHA.
Yeah, and which makes sense. I mean, when I think of OSHA and OSHA regulations, I think about slippery floors and elevators that are escalators that are malfunctioning. I might get my clothes stuck in or something like that.
And exactly. And so even if you set aside, say that OSHA did have the power to regulate communicable diseases, just what you said, even then, the ways they would be allowed to do that under the statute are not mandating vaccines. It's things like, putting up warning signs and inspections and, protective equipment, things like you would normally expect in a workplace, not saying, okay, now all these employees must go take a medical procedure outside the workplace, or be subject to all these other onerous medical regulations. That's not what the act is intended for.
So it seems like it's abusing it, honestly, is what it is.
Go ahead.
Yeah, lots of cases are now spawned, and it feels like that. Typically, I think from a legal perspective, you're waiting for the rules to be codified.
Yeah,
right.
and they have been published now, and that's why we went ahead and filed the lawsuit. And so, like I said, we looked at them. I mean, we all knew pretty much what to expect just from what the administration had telegraphed, and sure enough, it came out, like you said, it's a very lengthy. We're still kind of wading through a lot of the aspects of it, but yeah, I mean, it confirmed to us that it was what we thought it was going to be. It was just something that was blatantly unconstitutional, and that's how our client views it too, is just not only unconstitutional but very burdensome to them. And so I hadn't really talked about them yet, but our client is Gulf Coast Restaurant Group here in Mississippi.
You're free to share that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so they own several restaurants here in Mississippi. You may be familiar with some of them. It's Half Shell Oyster House, Rack House, restaurants like that. So they've got over 1,000 employees, and so they're going to be subject to this mandate. But it's important to point out, too, that they're very pro-vaccine. Since the vaccines came out, they've encouraged their employees to get it. They even offer a $100 cash reward to any employee who gets it. So, you can do the math there. They've ponied up to $100,000 to encourage vaccination. But, they've never required, on pain of losing their jobs, for their employees to get it, because they recognize it's a personal choice for all of their employees. And so, here's the problem for them is that I don't have to tell you this. I mean, we're in an incredibly tight labor market, tighter than Gulf Coast Restaurant Group has ever seen. Mm-hmm. They used to have 1,200 employees. Now they're down to 1,000. And so they're struggling to keep up with customer demand, struggling to keep their restaurants open. They're on limited menus, limited hours. And so, that affects their food quality, their customer service, wait times, their reputation, which you can't.
Revenue.
And you can't even put a price on the reputational harm that could come from this. And so what this mandate's going to do is encourage a lot of those employees to leave. I mean, they're not going to put up with this. I mean, especially people who work at a restaurant where you can move around easily. They could just go to another restaurant that doesn't have 100 employees, so they don't have to deal with this. Or they could just leave. And as you know, I mean, there's government benefits are plentiful right now, so they could just get on government benefits. And, if that happens, it's going to result in severe harm to Gulf Coast Restaurant Group. I mean, like I said, they're already struggling here to keep up. They're down from 1,200 employees to 1,000. And if they have more employees start walking out the door over this mandate, it's really going to cause harm to them. And so that's, they're proud of their efforts to vaccinate their employees and encourage that, but they're proud to stand up for the rights of businesses, too, to be free from these kind of unconstitutional mandates. And we're proud to represent them in that.
Yeah. And I saw the CEO of Dickey's Barbecue.
Yeah.
And with 1,000 employees, as is the case with your client, that in itself is a major hassle, especially all environments. This is onerous, but in a restaurant environment where, I don't know, it just feels like you got multiple shifts, you got lots of people coming in and out. And the fact is, that's an industry where you have lots of transient employees, part-time employees, and so it's just a nightmare. And then to keep up with all that as well.
And that's what our clients have told us too, is that they already deal with turnover, and it's something that's very difficult for them to deal with.
That's part of that industry.
It is. And so the cost of training these employees, but even more than that cost, the cost of the mistakes that new employees make and, upset customers and all that, you can't really even put a number on that. And so they try to keep turnover as low as they possibly can, even though it's always a problem in this industry. But this is going to make that a lot worse.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I saw the CEO of Dickey's and talking about their hundreds of restaurants and across the multiple states and employees. And that's just one little example that's magnified by hundreds that are like that. Thousands, maybe. Well, we got a break right here. You can stay around.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll talk some more about this. We'll come back. We're talking about vaccine mandates with our good friend Aaron Rice, director of the Mississippi Justice Institute. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Do you anticipate the Mississippi State employees being required to take the vaccination? Jim and the Delta, you were just explaining that to me off air, Aaron. Go.
Well, I mean, some state employees will be subject to, for example, university employees right now. The universities are imposing a mandate because they have the federal contractor vaccine mandate. And then some state healthcare workers will be subject to the Medicare, Medicaid, vaccine mandate. But in terms of this, a general mandate, no. So state employees who don't fall into one of those two buckets will not be required to do this. The state of Mississippi has not imposed a mandate for state employees, so they won't fall into anything like that. And then they won't fall into this private employer 100 employees or more category, because the state of Mississippi has not opted into OSHA, which state governments had the option to do, and Mississippi did not.
I didn't realize that.
This is not going to apply to state employees.
But if we were under OSHA's purview because we opted into it.
Yeah, arguably so. And I haven't seen necessarily how that's played out yet, but yeah, arguably so.
Wow.
Yeah.
How crazy is that? And so you could have states that did opt into OSHA that are, by virtue of that, having to require state employees.
Exactly.
And states that did not.
Exactly.
Oh, man, what a mess that's going to be. So there was something else. Kirk from Columbus says, what's next on vaccine mandates? The flu, pneumonia, once started, where does it end? I mean, that slippery slope is always a valid concern, and they'll try to parse this out. Well, this is different, and all. But the question that you and I were discussing off air, so it was Dr. Anthony lock him up forever and throw away the key Fauci, who a year ago maybe, I don't know, it wasn't too long ago. Of course, the pandemic's only been around a couple of years, arguably. He said once we get to 70% vaccination, you add that up to the natural immunity, we're there.
Yeah.
I don't see the need for this. Well, that's where we are right now. So what's going on here? What's behind all this?
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, if that's the goal, I mean, first of all, that's problematic from the standpoint of this OSHA mandate, because they're trying to sell this as if it's about workplace safety, when the president and other members of his administration have basically admitted that the real goal here is to increase vaccination rates, in the general population, which is not something OSHA has the purview to do. And so that's problematic from a legal standpoint. But then to your point, we've already met the target that they said that we needed to meet. And so, I think, genuinely what I think is that the Biden administration knows that this will get struck down in court. It's clearly unconstitutional. It's not even about exceeding that 70% mark. I think it's just kind of about virtue signaling to their base. And there's an expression, get caught trying. And so even if they know that they can't do this, they know that their base wants them to do this. And so they're willing to just go out and do it and get shot down in court just to get caught trying.
And then the other thing, from a grave danger perspective, all the data shows, this is what's incredible. Think about this here. With respect to COVID, we're talking way more about vaccine mandates than we are the actual COVID data. That's not even in focus anymore. It used to be every day we'd say, oh my gosh, how many cases today, how many deaths, the numbers are going in the wrong direction, all the lines are trending in the wrong direction. Now it's just the opposite. All the lines are trending in the right direction. Some scientists are even saying, I think pandemic-wise, this is over in a month or so.
And to that same point, the big change here now is that we have the vaccine. And so I think that fundamentally shifts the picture. Now we're talking about something where people have the ability to protect themselves if they want to from COVID. And so now we're not talking about this, I need to do this for my grandma or for everybody else in the world. I need to do these things or those things. Everybody has the ability now to go take a vaccine
for free.
And that fundamentally alters the paradigm.
Hard to make that case that it's grave danger. Well, we'll just go down and get vaccinated. You're done. So the government doesn't have to protect you from that when there are protections widely available for nothing on top of
particularly
that.
Given that the evidence seems to indicate that the vaccines don't reduce transmissibility.
Right.
And so I don't think that's an argument against vaccines at all. I think it's just the facts, and you need to be aware of it. So, if there might be an argument to be made if you were saying, well, you need to do this for grandma because it reduces transmission, but that's not what the evidence shows. So, we're really talking about to the extent there's a danger out there, it's something that we have all the tools we're ever going to have for people to protect themselves from it. And at some point, you have to move on and let people make those decisions for themselves.
I'll just describe it this way: it's a matter of risk tolerance.
Yeah.
There are those who choose not to get vaccinated. They're willing to accept that risk. There are those who choose to get vaccinated, even though some lash out or I guess speak against the vaccinations, and they say, "Well, I'm willing to accept that risk."
Yeah.
Just risk tolerance. Get out of the way, government. Leave us alone.
It is, and what it shows to me is there are some people who are a lot less comfortable with the fact that we're a free society, we're a free country, we're supposed to be a free country, and so sometimes you just have to let people make their own choices, and it's not something where you need to say, well, the federal government needs to come in and force people to do what the government thinks is best for them. I mean, that's just not how our country is supposed to operate. We've
seen to have lost that. It also seems like that this is politically more unpopular than popular, which makes you wonder why are they so dug in?
Yeah, it's like I said earlier. I mean, I'm not sure what the political calculation is there, but it does seem to me, again, I say this because I think it's so blatantly unconstitutional. I mean, the federal government doesn't have the power to do this, and they're claiming a Commerce Clause power to do this, it just does not extend this far.
Yeah.
And you've got separation of powers problems. You've got a lot of constitutional problems there, and to me, they're all very obvious. And so I say this just because it seems to me very clear that this will get struck down in court, and so I think the Biden administration has to know that too. And so all I can guess is that they've made the calculation that showing their base that they're trying to do this is somehow worthwhile politically.
I guess so. I can't quite wrap my head around it. It just seems like it's a hill that politically they wouldn't die on, especially given the shellacking they got last week. That was a bit of a wake up call.
Well, but what I've noticed is that even in the wake of Virginia, we've continued to see progressive politicians go down the same path, and so. Whether it's CRT or we got to keep shutting down schools because teachers don't want to teach, or we got to keep doing the masks, we got to keep doing all this stuff. And so I don't know that they're learning any lessons from it. It seems like they're just going to keep on, shutting everything down and keep on, doing their entire agenda.
Well, the progressives, in fact, have argued, as you've probably seen, no, the problem is we're not left enough. We're not moving fast enough to with all this stuff. And was it AOC calls it a euphemism, a derogatory euphemism. The term woke that's how she just fabricated, doesn't really exist. And then you got a gazillion examples of materials and books and videos and say, well, yeah, it does exist.
Well, they're so sensitive, too. I mean, anything you try to call any of this, whether it's CRT or woke or whatever, or any word you try to use, they say, oh, you can't use that word. And so at some point, you're just like, tell me what words I'm allowed to use to describe your movement, because you're clearly engaged in a very revolutionary cause, but you won't let us call it anything.
Exactly. All right, so you served, of course, in the United States Marine Corps. We thank you so much for your service. It's Veterans Day tomorrow.
Tomorrow, that's right.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, I'm excited for it. I mean, it was the honor of my life to serve in the Marine Corps, and it's always good, I think, to have a day to celebrate our veterans. I mean, of course, we got a couple of different days. Memorial Day is for those, who paid the ultimate sacrifice, and today is the Marine Corps birthday, just to celebrate Marines, but tomorrow is for all veterans, and I think it's important that we have that day. I always like to see, in America, we really do stop what we're doing. We celebrate our veterans and what they've done for us, and I just think that's something that really makes us a special country. And George Washington talked about how if veterans feeling appreciated for the service they've provided is going to be vital to the future of this country. And I think Americans have answered that charge from George Washington, and we've always done that. So I'm excited about it tomorrow, and just excited to see how everybody celebrates.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few detractors in our country. It's a free country.
Yeah.
And I think most people who serve would say, I'm okay with that. I don't appreciate it, but I'd fight for their right to do that.
Yeah,
that's
what
right. They can't
that's
comprehend.
Right. That's right. And like you said, though, it's a few detractors, because I remember from my time in the service, one thing that really stood out to me is, you got to go back. This was 2005. Iraq was a very divisive issue, and that's where I deployed. And I noticed when I came back, it really did not matter whether somebody supported the Iraq war or not, or whether they were a Democrat or Republican. When they talked to me, they were always very appreciative of my service and all of us veterans. And so I've always appreciated that I think The vast, overwhelming majority of Americans can set aside politics and support their veterans.
I totally agree, and I think Mississippi is unique in that it just seems like it's ubiquitous in terms of the support for veterans and the appreciation for them.
Yeah, for sure.
I had the opportunity yesterday. We got about 20 seconds left, but I interviewed an individual who served for 43 years, retiring the day after Christmas.
Wow.
And said, just going to go work on the farm and retire. But I was just in awe of this guy.
That's great. What a lifetime of service.
Aaron, thanks so much for coming on. Always enjoy it.
Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
We got more talk and the Foreigner tickets to give away on midday. Stay with us.